Hello, all you cinema drunks. My name is Elvirus, and welcome to the 5th annual Halloween Mixer. Welcome to our review of Night of the Demons. I don't want to do this alone.
Wow. Where are we? How did that happen? Thanks for summoning us to do this movie review with you.
Thanks for getting me out of that.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
What's your costume over there, Josh?
I am known as Kevin Murphy of Frodoshire.
Ah, F is for family.
F is for family.
And I am what I like to call one character in at least every Wes Anderson movie. Okay. So, Night of the Demon stars the amazing Liana Quigley, the legend from movies like Return of the Living Dead and the masterpiece, which is Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers.
I get paid for watching this garbage. What's your excuse?
Well, somehow I missed this one. This was the first time I saw it. And there is a time for these movies, and that time was the 80s.
Oh, I thought you were just going to say Halloween in general.
No, this is a product of the 80s.
And let's talk about what makes it a product of the 80s. Could it be the fat shaming?
This dude is a fat pig.
Or maybe the way it treats women?
Shut up and drive, bitch! So shut up and start walking!
You just better shut that mouth of yours.
Sit there, bitch! Get off that! I don't need your help, you damn little whore!
Quit the act. I know you've done this before.
Damn it, bitch! Come on!
Wow, bodacious booby, sis.
Eat a bowl of fuck!
This nudity.
Gratuitous nudity, stereotypical New Yorkers.
Now go tell that pretty little piece you call your sister that handsome hunk Sal's here.
Copying Evil Dead shots.
When people say Evil Dead was very influential, well, occasionally you're going to stumble across a movie that it influenced, Josh, and this is one of them.
Well, and it should be
It has the
influential,
Deadite.
I mean,
Well, it has the POV Deadite camera work, and it has, similar makeup design, like you said, the
Well,
slamming
you
of the doors.
mentioned-
I think the
and I
makeup's a
agree.
lot better.
I like the makeup better.
I liked the movie. I enjoyed it. I think it held my attention. I did not space out. Open with nice illustrations. There was a very long introduction. Good length introduction, I should say.
Love that. I forgot about
I
that
really
part.
enjoyed that introduction. The music had me worried.
Yeah, the music actually started pretty good, and then 10 seconds in got very, very 80s.
John talks about this a lot. I love plant and payoff in a movie. This movie does such a wonderful job of planting a story within a story that only comes back around at the very end, which kind of makes the movie an anthology in a sense. Not in your traditional sense, but that there's another story going on with the old couple, right?
Right.
Which has always been my favorite through line of the movie, even though it's so small.
I love that grandma. That also set the tone for the movie.
Yeah, he spilled his groceries. She said, "Can I help you?" And he's like, "You whore, get away from me."
I don't need your help, you damn little whore!
Do you guys have sour balls?
Why, sure we do.
Too bad. I bet you don't get many blowjobs.
I just became familiar with her work from watching Return of the Living Dead.
No other actress can shove a stick of lipstick into her nipple like Liana Quigley.
It was quite well done. I wonder if she did her own makeup for that scene too. 'Cause
Yeah.
That's funny that you say that, Josh, because the actual makeup artist of that scene, the original guy, ended up marrying Liana Quigley shortly after this movie was released. So apparently they had a lot to talk about while he was putting that fake boob on her.
I also like some of the other secondary characters, that little brother.
Oh, God, we need more of that. Spin off.
I would have had the little brother written in where he shows up at Whole House. I mean, he knew where
Right.
they were all going.
Right. I was hoping for
Yeah.
that too. And the scene that happens at that house with the fudge logs. with the
Oh, come on, Jay. Don't be shy. Have one. I just took them out of the oven.
offering the fudge logs. was
Those things just looked like the shit you take after being hung over for 24 hours.
And that guy was polite when he refused to eat them.
Yeah. but he turned out to be a total fucking dickhead.
I don't understand why you're acting like this. Half the school knows about you and Sal, so what's the big deal?
Find any character redeemable
Yes.
or even likable.
Well, there's one that they made redeemable by circumstance because he's probably the one you're talking about. He's a loudmouth.
The New York guy.
Yeah, and because he's a loudmouth, he's kind of left alone, not preying on one of these poor girls, you know, trying to commit date rape.
He was the star of the movie to me.
was.
And number 2 was Roger,
You just better shut that mouth of yours.
just because
Because he's such a pussy.
he was so scared and left her alone so many times.
Well, I mean, the way they were treating women in that movie, I mean, at least they let the heroine come in at the end.
Yes.
Like, she was the one that was standing up against the demons.
Well, no, I guess she has the scene in the incinerator with the gas pipe.
Yeah,
she does have a
she
final
gets her
girl
big
moment.
fight.
But at the very end, when she's just running, they needed to have a man come and save her, which sucks. You don't need that, you know? That guy should have died. And she should have got away. Remember what we have to do, Roger. Roger, they're getting through the door. Roger, there's a door, a pipe. Roger, remember?
Go get it, Roger!
Go get it, Roger! I love the main goth girl, like the girl that's not the girl from The Craft or the girl from American History X, but reminds me of her. The makeup on her is so scary,
It is.
and her movements in the dance and the weird kind of like devil song they had when
I
she's.
thought that was the best song.
It was
the
definitely,
movie.
yeah. It was like the
I was
first
like,
coming of
This is a
Rammstein.
good song, and it's like kind of unique.
Yeah, and her dance was really
I'd
unique.
like to know what song that was.
She's obviously got
You could
trained-
tell she's a dancer,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
because she was moving her body around very, very loosely. I mean, not super overly sexual, just like
No, they
very.
were real dance moves.
Yeah, there's a reason that character's on the poster, because she's the most prominent demon, but also just she's the one you remember. I mean, you can remember Leanna Quigley for other reasons. It's the low angle, sort of tracking movements of the way they make it seem like because she's kind of the only one that floats out of the demons, you know, and those small, narrow, dark hallways that she's coming towards us. It almost has like an Aliens effect when, you know, Ripley's running through a tunnel and then there's an alien. You see it in this skewed perception. You see things in movies sometimes where people are doing what they have to do based on what they have, and can they make that effective? And what they chose to do with her to kind of say, hey, this is our main one, stands out.
So, a bunch of teenagers want to have a party. They want to go to a dance originally. They go to a house instead because it's going to be a lot cooler. They're convinced to go to a haunted house, basically.
Fuck yeah. So then they get there.
They get there. They decide to do a seance.
Always a good idea.
Always a good idea. It is Halloween, too, in the movie. And the seance actually conjures a demon.
I liked how it wasn't a Ouija board in this movie.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
It was nothing.
It wasn't they did a mirror. Like they looked into a mirror.
Yeah.
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 It wasn't like a book they found.
No.
Nothing.
Yeah. It was a little different.
Yeah. The simplest of simple plots. And that's all it needs to be. It's on Halloween night. Your characters are dressed up in costumes. There's a party. There's shenanigans. There's sex. There's Coors Banquet. There's punk rock and hair metal music going on, and everybody gets killed. It's fucking the perfect Halloween movie. Leanna Quigley's screen time for her chest. Let's put it that way. A lot less in this one than Return of the Living Dead, but I think a little bit more
Focused.
That, you know, we're laughing.
Yeah.
You're laughing,
Yep.
but that makeup, that prosthetic breast is incredible. Because tell me, I knew that scene was coming and you guys didn't. Tell me that you did not, because I know, Josh, you were staring at that right breast that she's circling with the lipstick. You did not think that was fake.
That was the only thing in the shot. But yeah,
Untrue, there was also a right breast.
I feel like that was the most original horror aspect of the entire movie. Like, I don't even know why that happened.
I didn't understand how it happened either.
But they did it, and that's the most iconic scene in the movie.
So there's a few of these. There's a couple sequels. Honestly, I don't think I've seen any of them. But do not confuse this movie with Night of the Demon, black and white, that me and Josh watched in our first ever Halloween marathon back in 2010.
I love seeing an old movie that I've never seen before. 1988, I was 10 years old. Nostalgic for me in a way. And yeah, this is just a really fun movie.
I love this movie. I'm so glad that we're reviewing this one here on Cinema Gulp for the 5th annual Halloween Mixer. Because it's just, it's like I said, even if it's not as scary as I remember as a kid, it's the Halloween spirit. And some horror movies you stick around watching for years and years, even if they don't scare you anymore, because they give you that sense, you know, like, and this was more of a teenage, you know, later high school years one, so you didn't have as much like kids running around doing candy. It was the latter years of my days of enjoying the holiday as a kid, where you're trying to find a party, you're trying to find a haunted house. That's the shit I love. I still love that stuff. I would still, if the three of us just said, hey, on Halloween, let's go find a haunted house and fucking just search the house in pitch black, I'd fucking be all over that shit. I love that stuff.
I thought it was a fun movie. It's nothing to be taken seriously at all. Could be scary if you actually try to imagine that things were real. But since they're not, you just laugh at it, and that's the kind of horror movie I actually enjoy.
There's horror movies nowadays like Hereditary that just make you feel awful because
like
they're
that.
so depressing. Those are the only ones that stick with you as far as scares go.
Right.
Then there's the fun ones where may have a couple of scenes that are some imagery that's scary, but I prefer the Halloween feel, fun ride, the roller coaster ride of fun, with some scares, over something that's just going to make my soul feel icky.
Right, right.
I love those movies too. There's a lot of good filmmaking in
They're
there.
usually very well made.
Yeah, that was Night of the Demons for you, everybody. That was fun, right?
That was fun.
All right, let's move on. Let's see what we got next in store on the Mixer. Cheers!
Does anyone know what that movie was about? I'll tell you what it was about. About an hour and a half too long. Ripe and ready for a good time. As soon as this movie's over, I'm going to go out and have one. And you'll have one with this review of The Changeling.
Well, thanks, Elvirus. And to change things up for The Changeling, John's here reviewing this one. Hey, John.
Hey, all you cinema drunks out there, happy Halloween. So I'm here with Magic Mike. I don't know, your body's a little distracting to me. I think I'm gonna have to do something about this.
What? Alakazam! Oh, this is a lot more comfortable. Thank you for that.
There you go. All right, let's get into this ghost story.
Okay, 1980. Yeah, it feels like it. It's 40 years old this year, John.
40 years old.
Yeah.
Celebrating a birthday.
Starring the late, great George C. Scott, died 21 years ago, almost to this month.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a lot of great performances. So I'm not gonna say this is one of his best. In fact, we kind of thought there was areas, I remembered this being even more dramatic than it actually turned out to be on this viewing. But,
I do too, actually, yeah.
It's still a really good performance by George C. Scott. And one of the main reasons why I like this movie is his performance.
Yeah. Director was Peter Medak, who did a lot of TV stuff, did some Tales from the Crypt episodes,
Nice.
did a lot of Twilight Zone episodes when it came back in the 80s, and he did a couple of one of your favorite TV shows.
Hannibal.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Yeah, he must be pretty old, but
Yeah, seriously. Or he was very young when he did this movie to some degree.
Yeah, but he did a good job directing this movie.
Yeah.
It's not what you would think. So, you know, it's a really slow, I wouldn't say off-putting to like maybe younger audiences, but it's really, it's what I love. It's atmospheric, and I love that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you enjoy, I'd say more of the 70s horror, the pacing of a 70s horror, and less of 80s, and definitely anything that's current right now where it needs to be at such a rapid pace.
Yeah.
It takes its time to build its story, but I think that there's always something interesting going on within the story. If you're paying attention to it, it's unfolding like a mystery throughout this movie.
There's so many different things that come out in this movie where, you know, he's like, it's a lot of investigating. I think you had said like it has that kind of Ring feel because, you know, it's someone who's kind of burdened with what's going on. But then there's always that question that'll never be answered when it comes to haunted house movies is like, just fucking move. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just get out of there. But as the story progresses, you realize would that have even done anything anyway, you know? But at first you always ask that question.
I think if you're one of those people who the first scary thing happens in the house, you're like, move, get out of there, never come back.
Right.
If that's your feeling, you're gonna get frustrated with this movie because he keeps coming back to the house fearlessly. I mean, that's actually impressive that he's never really afraid of the situations he's getting involved in.
No, he's more curious.
He's more intrigued each time something happens. Let's talk about one of the other things that really shines in this movie, the sound design.
Yeah.
That's where this movie is a very atmospheric horror movie. It's not really about, there's jump scares, but it's not like in-your-face jump scares. They're definitely going to come from the sound design and the creaks and the creepy sounds that an old house has.
Yeah.
Especially in the first half of the movie. That's really what the buildup of this movie is built on. Is the eeriness of this location.
When you say that the sound design is more prominent in the first half, that's a perfect way to put it, because the first half of this movie, the haunts and the scares, they're all done through the audio. They're all done through the sound design, where the second half you get more visual door slamming and fire and things like that. So the creepiest stuff, and this is a layered mix, like super layered, not just like, oh, there's a creepy sound but there's like drips going on. And even that scene you were talking about where George C. Scott was like, what do you want me to do? Like, what do you, like, they just add in that extra echo that goes all the way up the levels of the house. Like, that's so good.
Yeah, you can feel like the space comes alive in that moment when he's screaming.
What do you want from me? I've done everything I can do.
And a haunting movie is only as good as the kids that you can get to do the creepy voices of the deceased kids. And ooh, that is.
Will you tell us why you are not at rest?
My father.
Joseph, did you die in this house?
My room.
Some creepy
They do
voices.
A great job. You almost have to strain to hear it. It's one of those movies that you want to watch at night in the dark, sound cranked up to 11, but be prepared with the sound cranked up to 11, that because the scares come from creaky sounds and scary sounds in the house, they're going to come out of nowhere and they're going to fucking freak you out and blow your sound system. But that's kind of the way you want to watch this movie.
Yeah, it's kind of weird saying how well the movie's mixed sound design-wise, and then at the same time going like, well, you're going to be like hard to hear some of the dialogue. Next thing you know, it's going to blow your speakers out with a loud car crash or something. But that's the intent.
Let's talk a little bit about the story. It starts off with tragedy. George C. Scott's family is killed in an accident on the roadside, and
horrible.
He's trapped in a glass case of emotion in that moment.
I'm in a glass case of emotion.
And then that sets off this story of this grieving father who's just trying to come to terms with, you know, all the loss and get back with his life. He's a composer, so he rents this big, giant-ass house, way bigger than anyone needs, but it has this old piano in it and this perfect music room that's going to be great for him to get back to work and try and get on with his life.
Yeah.
And then the ghost story ensues. And that's where it becomes very much like The Ring. It plays out. The rest of the movie has... even takes place in Seattle, same place The Ring takes place.
Yeah.
But obviously there's no videotape in this movie, but a ghost trying to solve its own murder is kind of what you have going on in this movie.
Yeah, and the way it's pushing George C. Scott's character into the directions that it wants him to go in. And I think that, because we were like, does it come back into play about his wife and daughter? I think that it's actually such a good script that it's there the entire time. It may not be mentioned, like, oh, you know, well, this put the rest, now I can move on. You never get that.
Because of his performance, you never forget that he's still grieving over the loss of his daughter.
You never forget it, but the story, and like when we're like, how come he's not scared, he's more intrigued, he's more driven, it's because it's a kid who died.
Yes, that's the motivating factor, as you pointed out.
And they never have to say that in the movie. It's just that's what's driving him to everything, you know?
Yeah.
That's good writing right there, folks.
Yeah.
The name, the Changeling. You know that there's going to be some kind of second.
Do you hear the house speaking to us right now?
That definitely sounded like a wheelchair turning in its tracks.
The unique aspect of the story and the title, which I think some people might be confused. I didn't even remember till this viewing of like, why is it the Changeling? And it's kind of a unique part of the story.
It makes it creepier. It's a creepy situation, and like as it all unfolds, and I mean, this guy should have been a fucking investigator, not just a composer, because he launches an entire investigation himself in days, and finds out like deepest, darkest, crazy secrets of this like. Not just the town.
He finds a secret room in the house, which is never a good idea to go into a secret room.
Yeah, that's that room. You know, like I said, would you, if someone paid you $1,000 to sleep in that for one night?
Nope. Not without a whole team of paranormal investigators and maybe a couple UFC fighters. I don't know.
What do you think about the cinematography and the shot selections? I thought it was pretty fantastic. It's almost up there with the sound.
I agree. Yeah, I think even though we point out the sound design as one of the strong aspects of the production values of this movie, it's top notch all the way through. The cinematography, the shot selection. The production design, as we said, the house, and not just the creepy old house, but there's this other mansion in the movie that's pretty impressive, and really just all the locations. There was like downtown Seattle scenes that were like, oh, that's amazing cinematography or amazing architecture.
A lot
and
of stuff
like
in
that.
The streets were shot really good.
All the creepy lighting in the house at night, just really stands out. It's never too hard to see what's going on. You have just the right level of darkness,
not too dark
to be scary. Even a couple scenes that we both mentioned where they layer some sound design with an image of a shadow walking towards your main character.
That's so good.
How did you die?
Father, no.
It seems so creepy, and then it turns out to be just reality. We thought it was not going to be.
It's a huge piece of misdirection done by the sound design and one shot that goes from one room to the next. I loved that because you don't know what is that. Is that music just playing because it's the movie and we're listening to it again? Oh no, it's someone else listening to it, and that shadow is them.
As you pointed out, because of the casting of a great creepy child voice, you're so kind of transfixed and engaged in that moment, and then the imagery on the screen of the shadow, you're like, what's about to happen here?
Yeah, this kid's voice rivals that of one Mary Hobbs from Session 9 when she goes in those different voices. It's pretty close. It's not as scary as Simon.
That's a strong endorsement right there.
Simon's the scariest voice in any movie ever made.
I live in the weak and the wounded. Dog.
I think some of the revelations in this movie, even though it's slow, it's rewarding. Like, you just stick with this movie. It's only slow because it's building atmosphere and made at a time where you didn't have to rush the pace to keep a viewer engaged, and I'm able to enjoy it still.
But if I have one criticism, this is my third time watching this movie. I haven't watched it in a long time, but I watched it 2 times prior. Mm-hmm. I don't remember the ending being so ambiguous and we don't have to give away everything that happens, but certain characters I thought were actually doing something, but it turns out they weren't. So was it metaphorical or is it like spiritual astral projection? And then it kind of ends abruptly, like a lot of those old 70s, 80s horror movies did. Mm-hmm. But I remember there being more closure to where you're almost like, well, I don't know, did the ghost get what it wanted? Did it get it just kind of ends quicker than I remember.
Well, and it even ends like so many early 80s movies had to have an ending that kind of alluded to the ghost is still, the presence is still around. Like, not everything is solved. It has a final image that sells that things are still afoot at this creepy location.
Yeah.
And so that leaves it even more ambiguous because our main character goes through a lot to appease this ghost in what he believes is what the ghost desires to stop it from haunting and even at one point killing a character in this movie, which I didn't realize it was capable of. Like the powers this ghost has is kind of an interesting ride that you see in this film because it progresses in a way that we didn't know, if it would actually get to that level.
Right. I like to think that most, like I said, this is a well-written movie, but most horror movies they try to set up their rules within their movie and stick with those rules. And this one, you could argue that the ghost is progressing and waking up more and more as more things are being unraveled.
I think, yeah, you were pointing
and that's
that
why
out.
like he can do stuff outside of the house. But then that begs the question, like, why does he need this man to sort of like get all these, like if he can push the medallion thing out, it's just like, well,
and I think we both kind of said that of like I was pointing out, like, why did it take almost 80 years for, even though there's been hauntings in this house and no one's wanted to live there, why did it take kind of 80 years for it to really get to this level where the ghost is pushing somebody to solve the crime and making real headway here or whatever, and doing what it's doing? And I think, as you point out, it's that personal connection that this man has.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's
Yeah.
him being a child, losing a child. Maybe if we're looking at, like, as we said, the ending maybe has this moment where somebody, we're not sure if it's metaphorical or someone is astral projection, you know, they're just thinking that they're somewhere that they're not. Like, if we look at it that way, that the movie kind of has those ties, maybe there is this really special connection that this character, because of losing a child, can communicate in a way no one else ever could with the ghost.
Well, in the music box, I think you're right, because the music box mimicking the song that he played.
That's right.
Yeah,
that
like that kind of has something to do with that.
He plays it
Way
without
before
ever
that.
hearing it.
Yeah.
It's in his mind.
Yeah.
So there are those weird connections that the film makes.
Yeah. There's a couple of things, loose ends. You know, there's a couple of, I wouldn't call them like major plot holes, but like loose ends where, why'd you, the fate of the house. It's like, why'd the ghost do that? Like, especially if like it's like you said, there's the final image
at the end.
Yeah, it doesn't really come together. But again, not every ghost story has to. It wrapped up George C. Scott's character. And let me say something about this movie. I was thinking this the whole time while watching it. And that's one of the cool things about George C. Scott is, and the era that he was acting in later in his life, you can make a film where your main character, protagonist, is kind of an aging, I don't want to call him a senior citizen in this movie, but he's an older guy. And you don't see that anymore. And like, having been someone who wrote a novel that is about a 78-year-old man that apparently no one wanted to read, I sympathize with that, and I really respect the fact that they made a movie where the main character is an older guy. I mean, he's not like at the end of his life. It's like probably, I don't know, in the 80s when you look, he could have been 40, you know, for all I know, like how you look in the 80s.
That's the way George C. Scott is.
Yeah, but and he's done that in other movies too. Even like The Exorcist 3, he's an olding, like aging detective, and he's the main character. Like,
Yeah.
I guess if you're a good enough actor, even if you're old, you can carry a movie. I don't know how good The Changeling did financially, but I know it's become a classic
But
horror
yeah,
movie.
like if it was made today, even with him being the lead character, you would have younger actors surrounding him to some degree, playing. You know, they'd have neighbors or.
If this movie
somebody
was
or whatever.
remade, it would be a young couple.
Yeah, it's totally different. Definitely had a great score. I thought this movie, I mean, along with the sound design, they actually work hand in hand. Sometimes where I was like, oh, is that part of the score? Or is that a sound he heard in the house?
Yeah, that's
and so that's a really nice.
Having just listened to the score, I didn't. Out of context of the movie, you don't really notice that stuff as much.
Yeah, so I think and there's some really great use of classical music because he's a composer at times. You know, I actually wanted more of that. I thought when he was doing that little session that he had, that little practice session with the students at home, that was like an intense little song they were playing, and I was like, I almost want to hear some of that later in this movie if it gets intense. But it's more of a quiet movie. It's the intensities come at moments in this movie, especially with the help of the score. It's able to intensify and go from dead quiet to intense very quickly, and that's one of the great things about this movie. But I don't think it does it too often. Like even though we're talking about there's a lot of like audible jump scares and things like that in this movie, it's not so much that you're like getting annoyed, like, okay, another one of those. Like, they're pieced out through this movie perfectly.
And like we said, it's not from a musical cue that pumps its fucking volume up to 11 to tell you to be scared. It's a door slamming, and they just use the effect so well. And jump scares have nothing to do with music, and they have everything to do with the shot selection of the shot right before the jump scare.
Yeah.
You know, it's setting up something you don't know is coming. If you do know the jump scare is coming, then they fucked up. You know? And that happens all the time in modern horror.
90% of modern horror.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that when I think about it, maybe because George C. Scott being in Exorcist 3, I almost think of this being like in the class of those 70s horror movies that have that really like demonic sounding score, like The Exorcist and The Omen and a lot of those other that are kind of religious based. And this one is not a religious based horror movie really at all.
Not at all.
A couple times the score sounds that way, but it's not really that. It's still creepy and effective all throughout, but it's not really that like chanting or like demonic sounding that you kind of get from some of those other
You don't see any
films.
crosses. He doesn't go to churches.
Exactly. It doesn't go religious at all.
He brings in a medium, and that's the closest thing you get to like someone who like knows anything outside of what he's doing.
To be honest, I was going to say while we were watching the film, that was the one part where pacing-wise, even though that's kind of like an interesting aspect, like ghost story, okay, a seance, like this is going to be a good scene typically, it kind of went on a little too long, and I felt like that was one of the parts of the movie where I started to lose interest a little bit.
I feel exactly the same. I think it's medium scenes in horror movies bring the movie to a halt. You have to get everyone around the table, and then you're like disconnected from the main character for a while.
Yeah, and they don't even come back. I mean, I guess because it's better that he chooses to investigate on his own. He's able to figure out stuff. They apparently just after doing a seance leave and don't even really follow up what they just investigated very much.
I think you said like, so did they not listen to this tape? There's like a spirit of a boy talking all over it. The scene after, when he starts listening to the tapes, it gets horrifying.
Yeah.
The way the way the director of this movie was like, let's move through the corridors, let's go through the hallways, let's go back up to where this whole thing is rooting from while we're listening to what's on the tape.
Mm-hmm.
That's another like thing about Session 9 that makes it so fucking frightening, is like you're just seeing
the location.
You're seeing the location
the
with
recordings.
Ugh.
I certainly respect The Changeling.
Me too.
I think it's a great ghost story. It's not the strongest like horror movie. Like it's a ghost story, and it's got its spooks and its scares. But like I don't know, horror sometimes like when you hear the word horror, you want something graphic, I guess.
Yeah.
And it certainly is not that, but it's spooky.
There's many different types of horror movies, which is why we do the mixer. So, and this is one of my favorite types. The quiet, haunting, atmospheric, creepy, sound-driven ones that have payoffs for years after you watch it because they stick with you. Then you have your Night of the Demons, which is just wild and crazy and lots of boobs and lots of blood, and that stuff's great too. You know?
Good for a Friday night.
That's what Halloween's all about. Enjoy yourself, whatever type of horror movie you want to watch.
Gotta mix it up, as we say.
And this is one we wanted to do for a while.
Yeah.
Glad we're getting around to it. Thanks, John.
All right, everybody. Happy Halloween out there.
Happy Halloween.
We're going to kick it back to our awesome host, Elvirus.
Thank you for watching Cinema Gulp's 5th annual Halloween Mixer. Unpleasant dreams.
It's